Welcome to Make Possible Bitesize, a weekly podcast brought to you by Permutive, championing change in publishing, advertising, and beyond. Each episode, we chat to an inspiring guest about their careers, their lives, and how they're making change possible. Let's bite right in.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for the second episode in this series dedicated to mental health awareness. If you haven't checked out last week's episode, the aim for this series is to show everyone out there that someone like you is going through something similar and that perhaps we can learn from each other on how to remain resilient. Last week, my friends talked about our experiences in the media industry, and a couple of key points I got out of that conversation was, one, it's okay to not be okay, and two, it is also okay to be happy despite everything that's going on. I'd like to thank Permutive for making this possible and BeOp for creating the conversational platform to shed light on this topic. In the description, we provide a few resources on mental health. Please have a look and share them with your loved ones. For today's discussion, I have my friends Sandy, Geoff, and Larry who work in the healthcare industry. This is quite a shift in perspective from last week's episode, as Sandy, Geoff, and Larry have been on the front lines of this pandemic. Being a veteran of both wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, I do not use the term front lines loosely. I want to thank today's guests for all their work and continued efforts to fight this pandemic. Prior to today's discussion, we had a chance to write some thoughts down to get us zeroed in for this topic. I briefly mentioned last week that I was getting FOMO looking at everyone's Instagrams during the pandemic, and it seemed like people were on a different planet than I was. With everything, like, you guys just, Geoff and Larry, you guys described like what, this past year has been like, just like a tiny glimpse at work. How did that carry over into just life in general? Like, how has life at home been like?
Um, well, I think the toughest part was raising my baby, and if I needed childcare, I was very hesitant to taking my daughter to my in-laws. Just because the risk of transferring over that virus over to them, or getting them sick, because back then they didn't know anything about how the virus is transmitted between pediatrics, let alone infants. So that was always a scare. So you have to sacrifice, the sleep. You have to sacrifice risking seeing other family, even though, they want to see their grandbaby. Even saying no to my mom, can't be visiting, even though you're driving from California and whatnot. So I think just being able to get together for comfort, for, enjoying each other's time and stuff like that. I think that was the toughest thing, just because risk of infection.
And speaking of risk of infection, like I know this past year, Larry, you're a new husband, starting to get the family together. So how was it planning like a wedding during this pandemic time?
Wow, that was a crazy experience. And mostly because planning a wedding just by itself is just a task in general. And you're having to deal with family, the interactions between family, learning them, trying to decide what do they want, what do we want. And you couple that with also the risk of COVID to try to find out, are we even having a wedding? And so me and my wife went through so many ups and down emotional roller coasters to try to figure that thing out. It got to a point where we're like, hey, the vendors are saying we can only have like 20 people, and we've already sent out like 280 invites, and everybody said they're going. So we're like, how are we going to tell these people? How are we going to tell these people that, it's just I don't know, you have to get your refund. It's pretty much over. But we found a way to kind of stick through it. We're definitely believers in Christ. And so he's definitely been at the forefront of getting us past a lot of the struggles and stresses that we had through it. Luckily enough, we were able to work it out. And so, God really blessed in that regard.
That's amazing to hear. So you have the stress of a wedding, owner of 4 rental properties, and you're also ER nurse. What techniques, activities did you do to stay mentally resilient during this time?
So I think, like a lot of people during this time, there was this question of uncertainty. There was a lot going on in the media around the world. I mean, I literally had to ask myself the question seriously, do I need to go to the store and buy 100 rolls of toilet paper before I'm done for? that was a legit question, honestly. And having to deal with the unknown and still trying to figure out how to stay sane and make sure you're doing what's best for your family and the people you're responsible for, which in my case was 4 other families in addition because of the rental property. And for me, I'm very big on a couple of things when it comes to mentally pushing through any situation. My faith in Christ, good exercise, and I love taking quotes and lived experiences of others who have been through tough situations to shed some light on what I should expect and how to mentally operate through it. Like, for example, one of my tenants lost his job. And as soon as I heard that, there was like 5 seconds of panic where I was like, oh man, this is horrible. I've got to pay these bills. There's like, the state has said they can pretty much go without paying any rent. So they're basically living rent free. This is just going to really just kind of build up and kind of just burden on me. And another tenant has been cut from their job. And needless to say, I mean, there was just a lot going through my mind. And I was just kind of went through like a quick reference of just being very sporadic, right? And in my mind, I went back to a quote from a movie by Will Smith. A lot of you probably have watched it. It's called After Earth. And it pretty much went like, the only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. Now, do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. And the actual outcome of that situation was completely different from what I led myself to even believe. They did end up leaving on their own accord and on good terms, actually paying a month's rent in advance before they actually left. So that definitely worked out. And being a nurse has been an honor during this time, but there has definitely been worries of if I could bring COVID home and potentially affect the family around me, questions of should we have this COVID wedding when we've been planning for over the past several months. I mean, you take the stresses that come with planning a wedding, and even without COVID, like I said before, it's just already a lot. But I'm so glad me and my wife were able to focus on our goals, not letting the fear of what could encompass us prevent us from moving forward tactfully and with a plan. And so I say, take care of yourself. Health and wellness is such a huge part of your mental overcoming stressors. Use references and positive reinforcement to direct your mind towards a better way of thinking, and stay close to family. That's the best support.
Absolutely. Sandy, like, how did you approach this past year with regards to mental resiliency?
So, if I had to be really honest, I wouldn't, when I think back of the last year, I don't really necessarily consider myself to be very mentally resilient, or at least it didn't feel like it, right? Like most of the year, it felt like I was drowning. And that I was just barely getting by. And so there were really tough days. And, piggybacking off of, the first question and about how, you're stuck at home and you can't distract yourself by doing things. While that's great, but with last year came a lot of political unrest and a lot of things that were being replayed on TV all over, like over and over and over again. You couldn't escape it. There's nothing, a lot of the realities of what we were facing was on the news every day in our faces. We had nothing else to do but look at our phones and watch TV, so that was pretty tough. And I also spent, I don't know if Larry and Geoff feel this way too, but I also spent a large part of last year feeling very angry a lot. With being a nurse, like there was a period of time where we were being called heroes all the time, like in the news, we'd get like pizza, free meals, Chipotle would give us free food. And I was so bitter, and it makes me feel bad sometimes to admit that I get, it's not that I'm not appreciative of the recognition that we as nurses are getting, but it almost made me feel like people were trying to tell us like, oh, it's not that bad. Like, you know, like you guys are heroes. So it's almost like a distraction from the fact that like we were suffering so much on the front lines. And granted, I wasn't even, you know, we talked about this. I wasn't really even on the front line, or because I didn't work in an emergency room or the ICU. I worked in a relatively protected unit in the neonatal ICU, but you know, it affected all of us, and there was a lot of unknown at the beginning. So I don't know. I mean, I went to therapy regularly. I did my best. I kept going even when I felt like there was really nothing to talk about. And you know, I just tried to tell myself that like no matter what, at the end of the day, you're doing the best that you can. And so maybe on those days where you can barely get out of bed, it's okay. Tomorrow is a new day. And so because you know, in the past, you know, I would beat myself up for not handling things a certain way. Like I would think back and be like, oh, I could have done this, or I should have done this, or why didn't I get anything done today? Or I told myself I was going to go to the gym. I told myself I was going to work out. And there's just some days where it was just too hard. And so something that I've learned in therapy too is to really have grace for those moments. Because if not, you know, it would keep you in this like cycle of shame, like goal setting, and then not being able to achieve those goals, and then beating yourself up, and then you know you just spiral over and over again. And so, you know, basically the theme of last year was just do your best, just do what you can. And it's okay if not every day is going to be a stellar day where you feel great, you are mentally resilient, you know. But you just have to, you just keep moving on. So
Absolutely. You know, like I
Wow.
think this past year, Jeff knows how I am like throughout life, is that I always had to set a goal. But I think with the pandemic conditions, pretty much it's just that had to be on pause, and it's basically day to day and get the family through it and try to be as positive as I could be, even if you could, like, you know, like you just tried to be positive. With Jeff, like how did, like, you know, what techniques did you use this past year?
Man, I really think I took the easy route compared to Sandy. Sandy, I pretty much turned to my vices, and that was alcohol for a little bit. I mean, I was drinking, you know, at night, to believing myself that I was keeping myself mentally resilient through the pandemic with that. And you know, I know that there's a lot of nurses there that can relate and say that they've been kind of like closet alcoholics. You know, if that's the only way to sleep, only way to deal, you know, is to take at least some of the stresses away. You know, you're in the ER, you're hyped on this adrenaline the whole shift. It's exhausting, and I realized that my coping mechanisms are pretty poor. But like Don said, I'm just so thankful to have Don in my life, is because one of the things that he taught me is to seek counsel. And when I would reach out to him as a mentor, I've always done this throughout my whole life. He gave me a lot of valuable lessons to learn on my own, like stoicism and developing discipline. He kind of gave me the little jump start again on using fitness as a discipline. You know, take your time out during the week to at least exercise, and release all the stresses that you have, or just not think about anything except your breath. And there was a time where me and my cousin were actually having a running contest with him and his friends, that I tried to run a little, at least a mile a day. And my cousin ended up running like 350 miles in 1 month, which is absurd.
That's
You
crazy.
know,
oh my
and you guys
God.
and you guys can see how much more mentally tough he is. But the point is, for me, is that I had to seek counsel and reach out to my mentors when I knew that I didn't have any you know, mental resilience. I had a life coach too, Sandy. His name is Bo Ash. The most important thing that he taught me was to really just let go of things that you cannot control and focus on things that you can control. And that's probably the most cliche thing, the easiest thing that anyone can say. It's really easy to say, but God, like, what a
Super
game
hard.
changer. You know, like
Yeah.
I'll give you one of the best examples is had a patient who was intubated in the ER, family screaming outside of the lobby, just trying to yell at you, and just, you know, just getting really, really angry, saying words that they shouldn't have. And you got to take a step back and realize if they're upset, you can either be upset back at them or develop the empathy and compassion, and rather than have frustration and anger back. So the things that I could control is my feelings toward them. And thankfully I chose, those two, empathy and compassion, other than frustration and anger. So that helped a lot. Yeah, and I just want to thank Don for giving me some tools to stay disciplined throughout that. So appreciate you, man.
I just want to let the viewers know that I didn't ask him that question particularly just so he could put me on a pedestal. That was that's not scripted. Just want to put that out there. So Geoff, and Sandy and Larry, like I know you guys, like it's definitely been a difficult year, and it's still going on right now. What are things that you wish that like I know we mentioned some things, but like if you could just put like a couple things out there, like something that you wish that you did better or are going to do better moving forward? Geoff, like I'm gonna tell on you and your mom for drinking that alcohol, but that's one. But like like what are things, so people who definitely relate to your guys' situation, like what would you tell them that you wish like you could do better moving forward?
The biggest thing that I took from that whole situation, and I continue to work on, is I wish I knew myself better back then. Everybody always thinks like they know themselves, but I really, really wish I knew my limits, my work balance life limits, my personality limits. It was pretty tough, like working 3 nights a week on a non-consistent schedule, because sometimes you don't get the schedule that you want from your managers or whatever. I was watching my baby 9 to 5 pretty much when my wife would go to work 5 days a week. I had to go to clinical because I was doing my nurse practitioner school like once or twice a week. I was doing homework and trying to have a social life. So I was really wearing myself thin. There was like so much we can do that I could do. I felt like I burnt myself out in my professional and my personal life. So I wish I would reach out sooner, not turn to vices that would temporarily make myself feel better, and I don't know, just kind of fix myself ahead of time. Maybe I should have thought about taking my pride, like that. I think that's a Filipino trait in general, but like my pride, I prided myself in my work, what I do at home and what I do at work. Like Sandy, like you said, I feel like our love language, our giving love language, is acts of service. So if I wasn't doing something, I felt useless. One of the things I wish I should have done was, I wrote this down. I should have written the top 10 things most important in my life at the time, and then circled the top 3, and then just worked my entire world around that, which was my health, my family, and then like my school work. I mean, I also had some other aspirations, like running a marathon like my cousin Don, or getting nice at golf, or doing side hustles, or even hanging out with my friends and having small barbecue parties. Like that doesn't matter. If the top 3 doesn't work, nothing else works. So, actually, Don, what panned out in like my favor after doing all that, asking you for help, asking my life coach for help, and kind of getting priorities straight. I have you guys to thank for like flipping that switch at the time when I thought my energy was low. So, the silver lining of that pandemic was that pandemic allowing me to tap into like a mindset that I was probably too immature to hold back then. You know what I mean? So the values that I learned from like Stoicism were like I created discipline, finding motivation each and every day to seek accomplishments, create happiness, pursue excellence, promote positivity, and like manifest the future that you really want. So I feel like after reaching out to you and Bo and other nurses, like-minded nurses like you, Sandy, I've always texted you about it. And then Larry, like I see you at work, and I always try to stay positive around everybody. Like it really helped me find clarity and relief knowing that we were all going through this together. And that, as long as I put my best foot forward and stay positive, I know I'll be in a better place. So yeah, I was pretty thankful for all of that to happen, and always moving forward with gratitude.
Larry and Sandy, what are things that you're going to do better moving forward?
Well, it's funny that Geoff, you said earlier that like, Sandy, I feel like I took the easy way out because we've had personal conversations, and every time that we have talked, I always used to feel like, oh my God, like, how's he surviving? And I'd be like, wow, like I'm over here complaining about like not, sleeping 6 to 8 hours like during the day for night shift, but my friend isn't even sleeping at all, between going to school. So, I just want to say, like, we all have vices, and alcohol is just one of very many. And so, you know, alcohol personally isn't mine, but I can scroll on social media for like hours. Like that's my vice, is just repetition and just watching things that I shouldn't be watching. Like my boyfriend has this saying, like he'll call me at the end of the day and he'll be like, have you blinked today? He'll ask like, have you blinked? Remember to blink, don't forget to blink. So I just want to like give you credit, for that. You didn't take the easy way out, that your pain is your pain, and that but if something that I could do better is probably stay off social media more, because it was like trigger after trigger after trigger. Then I would get hyped up and mad, and then so it just wasn't really conducive to my mental health. And then also just to be a lot more forgiving to myself. Again, a question that my therapist has asked me in the past is, Sini, like, how often do you just let yourself be upset about something? How often do you let yourself just be angry? And so a lot of times, like last year, as we said before, like I spent a lot of last year just being so upset and being angry about everything that was going on in the world. And but then I would feel guilty about it. So then it would just be like this repetitive cycle of like, okay, I'm really upset, but now I feel bad about being upset. And you're just fighting yourself all the time. So, a practice that I would like to be better at is just like, hey, it's okay. It's okay to feel all these things. And the only way to move forward is through pain and not such great feelings. You can't, there's no way around it. It's always going to be there. So just being forgiving myself for who I am, being human, is probably something that moving forward, I really would like to work on. So
strength through struggle.
Absolutely. For me, things I wish you better. For me, it's more so in life, I'm finding that there are just a lot of different things or stimuli that's kind of reaching and grasping for our attention left and right, whether it's like going back to what she mentioned on social media. I mean, first it started off as like MySpace, if you guys remember that. Facebook. I mean, on MySpace, in MySpace, you could like have the music in the background and like have your whole thing going. It was great.
Yeah.
But I just kind of, you know what I mean? But I've kind of seen this progression in life, and I'm not that old. I'm only 30, where, it used to be we go outside with friends and everything was done outside. I mean, the people remember playing basketball, just playing hopscotch. I must admit, I did do hopscotch for like a short time. But there was guilty. Okay, I got somebody else with me. But there was I remember just there being a simpler time where I could just enjoy the simple things, and not being so captivated by the media trying to grab our attention left and right. And so I kind of go back to, when it comes to me doing better, just working on myself a little bit more, doing more reading. I mean, I always tell myself, hey, read this book at least 2-3 pages a day. And I find myself doing it like maybe once every 2 or 3 months and that's a huge thing, because self-education is important. And I think there's a quote that goes somewhere, don't like take me this per fact, but like, if you want to keep a poor man down, or something along the lines, if you want to keep somebody in the same place, give them a book to read and they pretty much won't read it, something along that lines. And so I really want to say that when it comes back to what I could have done better, it's just self-education, being closer to my family, enjoying those times. With all the stress that was going on with the wedding, I was so kind of just captivated by everything else that was going on. I couldn't truly say I could even enjoy my wedding to the fullest. I mean, as soon as the day started, it was over. And if we didn't have any pictures, it would be hard for you to convince me that we had a full day's wedding, to be honest.
Wow.
I think, and I think that just kind of ties back to appreciating the moments and not letting stress and anxiety prevent you from enjoying what's right in front of you. I mean, you've heard the saying, my, where's the time gone? And that's a real thing. So enjoy the moments as they come. And that's the best thing I think anyone could do.
Definitely. Like I think this pandemic, all the death that the entire world has experienced is unfortunate. And for the ones that are still around right now, it was more so of, I suppose, a forced reset into Larry, to like what you were talking about, into appreciating what we had prior to, social media and whatnot. Just appreciating simple and basic things. Last week, I asked the group if they had any final thoughts, but like for you guys, are there more questions that we need to discuss, or any additional observations you'd like to bring to light before we sign off?
Don, I
Geoff,
had a
and then I mean we could edit this too. So
well, I just want to bring a company to light that I think would be a great resources for nurses in Arizona right now. There's a company called Earn, EARN, that's focused on finding the right opportunities for nurses in Arizona who feel that their current situation isn't working, whether it's scheduling, salary pay, location, or anything else. These guys would love to work with nurses, interview them to kind of assess their needs, and pretty much headhunt their resume for them across the valley and land them a job that I think would be a better match for them. I met these guys personally. It's Ryan and David. And their website is earncares.com. I think some nurses who are either afraid to reach out and find a new job that's outside their comfort zone. I can give an example for myself. Like I've worked as like a nurse's aide at a hospital, and I only know what I know. So the only next step was to just work as a nurse in the same hospital. I would never to think like, hey, maybe I can work at my own schedule as a home health nurse and kind of travel and have time to myself when I drive, or work nights at some other place, or be on call for a doctor's office. I think these guys work really well to helping nurses who don't have the time to do that for their own resume and their own professional career. They can do it for them. And they also give a lot of great mental health resources as well. So yeah, earncares.com is pretty legit.
All right.
Yeah.
Sandy, Larry, any final words?
Yeah, I mean, to piggyback off what Geoff was saying, I just switched from the bedside to a case management job, and I work from home. That was a pretty tough decision for me because, like Geoff said, in nursing school, we're all trained to believe that bedside is the only way. It's like, it's the top tier of nursing. You go to the floor, and then you go to the ICU, and you're gonna be big and bad. And so again, it was really tough for me to leave, because I felt like, well, am I taking the easy way out? Is this less? Does this make me less of a nurse? And so for a lot of nurses that are struggling with their mental health, or just having a hard time being at the bedside, there's options. There are opportunities that are conducive to your work-life balance and your mental health. And so especially, in a profession, again, where there is such a lack of mental health support. There's no classes in nursing school, part of your curriculum, that says how to take care of yourself 101. It's just like the more selfless you are, the better the nurse you are. The more self-sacrificing and selfless you are, that just makes you the best nurse there is. And that's not true. But no one teaches you that. No one teaches you that. So I would say, to other nurses that are listening to this, or want to have a conversation about this, that it's okay to not want to do the traditional things that like a nurse would do in the trajectory of their career, that there's options and resources, and that it's okay to reach out for help too, even if it doesn't have to be a therapist. It could be like, Geoff, you have a friend and a life coach and your cousin, like someone, you can always talk to someone. So
Oh,
yeah.
thanks.
Mhm.
Yeah, so and to that point, I just want to pick back off the fact of nursing not having to necessarily be like the only thing you're into. And so anyone out there who has just had a dream about pursuing some other goal in life, and there's this fear component that comes with it, try your best to get past that. Try your best to get past that, because you'll find that a lot of people's fears will keep them from doing what they really want to do. And I myself have enjoyed nursing. It's been, I believe nursing is by far the best career I could have ever chosen. It has opened up so many opportunities. I've been able to work all around the country and just accomplish so many things. But even now, I find myself in a transition out of that field, not because I'm necessarily, I don't necessarily have a passion for it, but for whatever it is that you want to do, pursue it. Because the one thing you don't want to do is regret not trying something when you're at the end of your day. You know what I mean? And so that's the last thing I could really leave with anybody. Just be true to you and make sure you're doing the best thing you can do to grow and evolve yourself from one step to the next.
You guys are super inspiring. We'll end on that note. It wasn't long ago when we used to bang pots and pans at 7 p.m. in New York City to thank our essential workers. Though I live across the river in New Jersey these days, to you guys out in the West, I want to thank you guys for all that you've done and all that you continue to do. From the bottom of my heart, thank you to all of our healthcare workers doing a thankless job. And of course, I want to thank you, the viewers and listeners, for checking out this discussion on mental health. Next week, we will be checking in with the media industry again. So thank you so much, and I'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good one,
Bye.
everybody. Thanks.
Thank you.
Everybody take care.